Hey everybody, welcome to More Wild Talk, where we have neither more nor wild these days. We have
I don't know if they're coming back.
And Dave. Well, I mean, we do such a good job. I think the station is going to keep us on. Actually, this is the Tethered show because we're both wearing.
And I think I was wearing the shirt last week.
You were.
I haven't been wearing it since last week.
It's a great shirt.
It is my most favorite shirt because it's the most comfortable.
It
shirt
is
I
a
own.
comfortable. It's a great shirt, and we got a brand new website at Tethered. Tethered.online. This is my selfish plug that I have no guilt for. We got a brand new website. You should go check it out. It's pretty awesome, and it's a great website to send to your friends and family and all of that.
Yep.
So, more Wild Talk. We are talking about violence and war and bloodshed tonight. It's kind of fitting being Halloween, I feel like, now I'm thinking about it. Kind of
You see a lot of bloody time of year.
Yeah, it's spooky.
Well, not really
time.
bloody, but just pretend bloody.
So we're going to talk about it as Christians. Should we be promoting violence? Should we condone it? Should we be involved in the military? David has his 20-year retiree of the military.
To find out if I made a 20-year mistake.
Yeah, 20-year mistake right here. So
maybe, I don't know.
Before we jump into that subject, though, we have a couple announcements. One, we're going to begin a brand new sermon series this Sunday. Marriage matters.
It does matter.
I think it matters. And we're going to be talking about it for 3 weeks of, if we think it matters, then we need to be doing these 3 things. We're going to be talking about priority. Priority has to matter to us. Pursuing each other has to matter. And purity has to matter. And Tracy's going to be giving us that last one when I guess he gets back from Europe.
Assuming he comes back.
I see pictures and I'm thinking, I don't know if he's going to come back. He looks like he's having a great time. So be looking for that on Sunday. Great one to invite, if you have grandkids, if you have kids, if you have a cousin who's getting married or soon to be married. I know we have a couple of our young adults who are thinking about getting married. It's going to be a great series. Also, this Saturday is the last day for the Buggy Bunch Pumpkin Patch.
That's right. Last day.
They are out of here. They're having one more big family fun day. They're going to have slip and slides and corn pits and I don't even know what they have. Stuff. Lots of stuff.
Stuff for the family.
Pumpkins are guaranteed if you come. So make sure you head down on Saturday. They open up early, like 10 a.m., close at like 8 p.m. or something like that.
And tell your neighbors and friends.
Yeah. I mean,
I met somebody yesterday. Random stranger.
You did?
I did, and we were talking. We actually ended up helping her change her tire in her car, but she had just hosted a Halloween thing for their company, like a law firm or something like that. And we're talking to her, and what kind of Halloween thing? Like, our church is doing this thing. What's that? Like our church? It's the Buggy Bunch is doing it. It's at the church building. She goes, "That's where we got our pumpkins.
That's the place to get pumpkins in town."
That's right.
So
that's pretty cool.
I mean, people want to go to it, and there's a photo contest with it. You take a photo, you tag Buggy Bunch, you tag Vero Beach, you follow us on social media, and you could either win 2 SeaWorld tickets or a $50 gift card to Amazon.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. So great. If that any reason to come, snap a picture.
Hold on a minute.
Yeah, as I say, send a picture, tag somebody in it. There's got to be pumpkins in that. So
we'll have to go outside.
Yeah, get outside, get a little selfie, you'll be good to go. So, all right, I think that's enough time of talking and waiting for people to jump on. Now let's talk about violence. So here is why I think it's important to talk about violence with you specifically, because
I'm a very violent person.
You're a very violent person. You threw something at me one time. No, because you served in the military.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that experience.
Just my military experience?
Yeah,
in general?
So specifically tied to being a young Christian male and joining the military and that dynamic.
I'm sure I wasn't thinking about it at all.
Sure.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I chose the military because I knew, it's kind of weird. It's like I knew I needed discipline.
Yeah.
Like I was in college and I was doing not that okay. And I felt like I was wasting my time and I was wasting my parents' money because they were paying for me to go. And so I joined the military. And I knew the military, and as a kid, I was interested in the military. I liked just military things. I had military books of airplanes and ships and stuff like that. And, it just seemed like a logical decision for me. I knew exactly what boot camp was going to be like.
Yeah.
That's actually the only part of the military that was exactly what I thought it was going to be. I knew exactly what boot camp was going to be. Once I got out of boot camp, I thought it was still going to be everybody barking orders at you and yes sir, no sir, and turn left and go and march everywhere you
Yeah.
went. No, the rest of the military wasn't like that at all.
Right.
I mean, there were times we marched and things like that, but it was much more of a I mean, it was teamwork. It was where, I mean, yes, there were orders and things, but people didn't bark them. They just said, hey, go get the XYZ or whatever, and you go, okay, and off you go, and you go
Right.
get it. Or I might say, yes, sir, and you go get it or whatever. Just depends on who it was. But, I was in the submarine service, and there's every branch and every, specific field you go into has its own risks, and they're all different. With submarine, your biggest risk is like dying in your submarine because of a fire or an explosion or it filling up the water and sinking to the bottom or things like that. And so, my whole military service, I never shot and killed anybody. I don't think in my service, like my personal experience, I don't even think any ship I was on actually launched a live weapon at anybody.
Right.
Now, there are other ships, other submarines who have. There's other, other branches of service and different types of things you get engaged. Infantry, or tanks, or airplanes, or bombers, or anything like that. Especially over the last 20 years, you might have been sent over to the Middle East. And so you may have found yourself in a combat situation, or maybe you're part of a support group that supports those who are in combat, or things like that. And that's a different kind of danger. That's a danger of getting shot or blown up.
Right.
So there's different kinds of dangers and different kinds of just situations you can get into that I mean, those situations by themselves change your perspective on life. Mm-hmm. They really do. I mean, even in the submarine, again, I didn't shoot anybody, I didn't launch any weapons at anybody, but there were plenty of other hairy situations that we found ourselves in that could have gone very badly and could have ended up maybe in some kind of shooting exchange or something, or just you never know. And I can't tell you everything because it's all like,
you'd have to kill me.
I'd have to kill you. And then that would be violent.
That would be violent. which leads into a big question. Do you think you could have killed somebody if you were given the order, or if the opportunity presented itself?
If that I could have. That's a good question. I think too, one of the things about warfare, especially today, I think for the most part, now we'd have to talk to somebody that was in infantry. So this probably doesn't apply to them. But for the most part, a lot of the killing that happens in the military, you're no longer this close. They're so far away you don't even see them.
Yeah.
You launch a Tomahawk cruise missile from 1,000 miles away.
Yeah.
That's like from here in Vero Beach to somewhere in the central United States. I mean, it's that far. It's sending a missile to Nebraska. It's like I'm not going to see them. And so there's a bigger disconnect there as opposed to seeing someone face to face. But also, if that person is trying to kill you, now you've got this engagement of like it's do or die.
And we're going to talk a little bit about the intruder in your house situation.
That's one of my favorite scenarios.
But the real question that we're asking, we're focusing on military first. Should Christians go into the military knowing that killing somebody might be on the table for them?
Yeah, I mean, it's one. I would say it's definitely a personal choice. That, and it's not going to be. I have nobody specifically. Well, I can think of somebody specifically. Nobody I served with, but somebody who's been a family friend, like friends of my parents, and they had a son who went into the military who disagreed with one of the missions that they were going to go on. So he wasn't like a conscientious objector, which is the code word, or it's not a code word, it's just like the title they give to somebody who says, we should not go to war ever, period.
Right.
Like, I object to the concept of war. That person should never join the military.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes they do, though. It's really weird. Like, they get in there and then they decide, I don't think this is something I can do. And so they end up getting out of the military. And so that was the case with this person who's kind of a son of a friend of my parents type thing. And he disagreed with the reasons for going into some particular place, and he refused to go.
Right.
And it cost him. It cost him because he had made an obligation to the military. I think it was the Army, and he had been in for several years. It wasn't like, today. It wasn't like he joined today and tomorrow he had a realization. It was more like he'd been in the military for a few years, like several years, been through boot camp, been through some other training, training to do the job that they're going to need you to do if they deploy you somewhere. But something about the particular mission they were going on, and I certainly don't have the details, was something he did not agree with.
Right.
Now, there's something interesting in the military that a lot of people don't know about, and that's the concept of an unlawful order. And they train you about this in boot camp and other things, you are not obligated to follow an unlawful order. So if a superior, doesn't matter how superior they are to you, and they give you an order to go and do something. If it is unlawful, like to shoot an innocent civilian, that would be an unlawful order. You are under no obligation to follow that order. As a matter of fact, you are compelled to not follow that order.
But so then what's the line of morality in that, of deciding what is lawful and unlawful?
Yeah, well, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. And you can, it's possible you could choose wrong.
Yeah.
Somebody gives you an order, you think it's unlawful, you choose to say, no, I'm not going to follow that order.
Yeah.
And then there could be negative consequences for you. But I think that's sometimes the situation of addressing morality in our lives is sometimes we're not always going to come out of it favorably.
Right.
Like we think, if I choose morality, then I will always come out of it favorably in this world. And the truth is that's not the truth.
Right.
That sometimes choosing morality will actually put you on the losing side.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, that is the story of Jesus. Is you're on the losing, quote unquote, the losing side by choosing what is right and what is true. And that's the frame. I mean, I'll do my hot take right here at the beginning. I think war is bad. I think war is wrong.
I think everybody loses in war.
Yeah, everybody loses in war.
I do, as a military person. And I think a lot of military people, especially military leaders, I think they understand that concept.
Yeah.
They don't, war's not something, if you see somebody who is wanting to go to war, there's something wrong with that person's view of the world.
Yeah.
And I think most military leaders would say, most submarine commanders, I was in submarines, would say, I don't want to launch a missile at somebody. I don't want to shoot a torpedo at another ship. I don't want to go into battle.
And there's something, I actually read an article about this. There was it's a story of a sniper who had his crosshairs on a terrorist with a grenade running to a group of U.S. soldiers. And he was given the order, take him down. And I mean, if you could justify killing in any moment, there it is. There's the handbook for it.
Right.
And he made the shot, took him down. But he says, and he told stories of nightmares that he had afterwards, even though it is a quote unquote justified killing by many people's standards. But just the act of taking another human being's life. And that's the question we always, I think a lot of people, we talk tough, but whenever you're looking at the life of another person and
it's in your hands.
And it's in your hands, could you actually do it? And should you do it? And if you say, I absolutely could do it, is that the right response, the response you should be going for? And this is just looking at the person of Jesus, because we have to, as Christ followers, we have to put the scenario of Jesus into the equation of what Jesus did for us, of the torture and the pain and the death that he endured so that he could give life to all people, and the place, the mode that he put himself in of being at the mercy of everybody and not promoting violence in the process. Yeah. So how do we navigate that?
Yeah.
In war?
I think part of that, especially when it comes to Jesus and it comes to our life, it to me it balances on this question of I could, but should I?
Yeah. Yeah.
Should I? I could, but should I? Because that's really the thing with Jesus. I mean, we look at Jesus and we look at what he allowed himself to endure, because he could, with a single thought or less, could have wiped out the entire world.
Called down 10,000 angels.
Yeah, we sing that song. He could have done that, but should he have done that?
Right.
And again, when it comes to Jesus, I think, and it depends on what part you want to talk about. I think with everything, with all this, it's very situational.
Yeah.
It's very, very situational. There is no one answer textbook. When this happens, this is an okay response, and when this happens, that's not an okay response.
Yeah.
It is never that cut and dry.
But in the end, because a lot of people will say, well, America is the advancement of freedom and goodwill in the world. But here's the raw reality and hard reality. Rome thought they were too.
Yeah. Yeah.
In their perspective, they did too.
Right.
And you don't see early Christians, you don't see Paul, you don't see Jesus talking about promoting the advancement of the nation of Rome. They talked about the promotion of the advancement of the kingdom of God. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think we always have to put ourselves in, of it's God's kingdom over all the others, even my own. Despite, and I feel like I'm a fairly patriotic person, and I feel like America has a lot of things, has a dark history, has a lot of things, mistakes in our past, and I'm willing to look and own up to those, but I think it brings a lot of good into the world as well.
Right.
And especially for my family, and I benefit, and my faith benefits from that. However, the number one priority for me has to be the kingdom of God. Right. It has to be.
Yeah.
So that's the military. That's talking vaguely. Now let's zoom down to an instance. And the most common instance, the most common scenario somebody will paint is an intruder breaks into your home.
Right.
Yeah. You have guns, you have baseball bat, you have nunchucks, whatever you got. I'll be actually talking
your
about
golf club.
A golf club.
You're not a violent person, so you just have a golf club.
A baby stroller, right?
Whatever.
Coffee mugs, whatever you got something. Right. What do you do? How do you respond as a Christian? What is the right response here?
Well, I have to answer that?
I have thoughts.
Okay.
You lead and I'll follow.
We're gonna have a 5-minute break here for a moment while
5-minute break
while we wrestle over what you physically wrestle. No, I think again, there's lots of situations. I know, like some of the laws when it comes to people, it's like let's take shooting somebody, an intruder in your house and shooting them. You have to give them the opportunity to leave. Which means you cannot shoot a person, and this may vary from state to state. So if anybody out there is an internet lawyer, just don't come at me. Don't come at me for this. I mean, I'm not an expert, but generally speaking, the things that I've read myself in some states is that it's frowned upon. Yeah. I don't know if it's like straight up you're going to get in trouble, but it's not a good situation if you're standing between the door to the exit, and the perpetrator. And they've got to go past you to get out the door. Right. Because then it's like they're advancing on you, and that might make you, in fear, take action against them when they really were just going to the door. Yeah. And so there's something about that. I actually have a minister friend of mine. Not that makes it more better or worse. But
it adds a dynamic to it.
Right. That he woke up, he's a single guy. He woke up, and he heard some noise in his living room.
This is seriously my worst nightmare. Yeah. I have nightmares about this scenario,
He gets his pistol. He opens his bedroom door, and there's a man in his living room, like disconnecting his cable TV stuff or whatever, like a thief, literally in his living room. And he points his gun at him, and he says, I don't remember what he said. I know he said, like, "What are you doing here?" or something like that. He goes, "Get out of here," right? And the guy looked at him all scared. He goes, "How?" And he goes, "The same way you came in.
Whatever way you got in here, go that way."
So the guy ran back to the kitchen and jumped out the kitchen window because that's the way he came in.
Hey, there you go.
Right? He probably could have gone through the front door that was right next to him, but he said the same way you came in, and somebody's pointing a gun, you go, "Okay," off he went.
That's good. That's a good story.
No violence was done there. He pulled a gun to protect himself. Now, if the guy would have rushed at him or done something else, he probably would have shot him.
Yeah, and that's where the real rub is.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah. And that's where I think there's so much behind intent. Another thing they taught us in the military, because I stood guard, I stood guard all the time. We always had a pistol or a rifle or a shotgun.
One of the Buckingham Palace people with the
No, not that fancy at all. Man. It was more like a ball cap and a blue shirt with our name on it, whatever. And we're standing on the they call it the brow, the part that connects the pier to the submarine that you walk across, right? And we'd stand there, so you had to walk past us to get on board. But there were rules of engagement is what they call them. You've probably heard that in a movie or something like that too. And there was different rules for different situations. And again, you still had to interpret those rules on the fly as you're dealing with the situation. But one of the things that they taught us was your intent is very important, and your intent should only ever be to stop an intruder.
Yeah.
Your intent should not be to kill that person.
And that's the key.
Yeah.
That's the key. And I really want to hone in on that idea, because just looking at this one scenario, there's all different kinds. Somebody in a parking garage, somebody, in a store violating. I mean, there's all kinds of scenarios that we could break down, but we'll just stick with the intruder in the house. Is we have to remove ourselves from this or that thinking. And this is true in so many areas of our life, but definitely in this one of we often will categorize, we'll split down the middle. Either this, I get killed by this person, or that I kill this person.
Right. Those are the only two options.
There's the only two options. That's the only way of getting out of this. And that's because we watch so many movies.
Right.
Where it is a this or that option. And that's the point of a movie. It's to make you weigh these two major, the two extremes against each other, and that the hero is going to fall into one of those extremes. But life doesn't work that way.
It never does.
Life never works that way. And I think what you said is key is my goal is to stop the person. My goal is not to kill the person.
Right.
It's not to fall into a this or that mentality. Because here's the truth. Do you know? So let's just say somebody breaks into your house and says, I'm going to kill your family or whatever if you don't open up this door.
Right.
Do you know that person is actually going to do that?
Not really.
You have no idea.
Right.
You can assume based off the...
Well, they said they were.
They said they were, but I mean, you could say I got a gun.
I say a lot of things that I don't actually do.
Oh, totally. Right? I mean, we do this all the time. And so that's just one example of just because someone says something, just because someone's doing something like breaking into your house, you think, oh, well, they're violent enough to break in my house. They must be violent enough to kill me. And that is this or that thinking. There's only two ways to get out of this, and somebody ends up dead in both.
Right.
And I think we have to step outside of that. And the same is true if you look at the military or you look at violence and riots and things like that. It's either the police beat them or the police get beat. I mean, it's, it plays out in all situations where we live in extremes. There's no gray area. It's only black and white. The other question, do you know God will or won't intervene in that situation? Yeah. So, one thing I've had this conversation with somebody before, and they looked at me and said, well, what do you want me to do? Just get on my knees and start praying? And I wish I would have responded and said, well, that's telling me a lot about what you think about the power of prayer.
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying you should do that. I'm not saying it's the best situation and that. I don't know. I'm not in that circumstance. I'm not there.
Right.
But how do we know how God's going to work? I mean, I just taught a teen class yesterday, and we talked about Paul and Silas being beat in a courtyard for taking a demon out of a young girl, being thrown into a prison after being beaten to a plum, and they're worshiping and praying and then saving their jailer.
Right. Yeah. You never know.
How do you know how God's going to intervene?
Right.
Right. And so,
hold on though.
Okay.
I got to throw a little monkey wrench in there.
Let's do it.
You cannot ignore the fact that Jesus drove people out of the temple.
Yes.
He turned over tables, and he make a whip and drive them out and stuff. That was a violent act.
Yes.
Did he kill anybody? No. Right. But Paul and them didn't kill anybody either. I mean, they eventually got...
Yeah.
But Paul's execution was, call it, ordained by the government. So I don't know, again.
Yeah.
I don't even go down that road. But, Jesus did do something that I think could easily be portrayed. I would call it an act of violence. How violent? Again, violence has degrees.
Right.
If I push you because I'm frustrated and angry at you, that's an act of violence.
Yeah.
But if I punch you, that's a stronger act of violence. Right. If I stab you,
and so so this isn't saying that there is not a place for, and violence is such a hard word.
Well, yeah, Ecclesiastes, there's a time for peace.
Yeah.
And there's a time for war.
Yeah. Well, Solomon says a lot of things in that book that are hard to really swallow in that one. But to go to your point, this is not saying that you should be a doormat and just be walked all over.
Right.
There is a time to respond to something, especially if, and this is where it goes to the Jesus in the temple, that there is somebody being oppressed.
Yeah.
Anytime you see Jesus responding in what we would call anger, it's what I call anger.
Right.
It is in response to somebody else being oppressed. It's never him.
Right. Right. And I think that's a super important distinction, because in our world, especially in America, where personal rights are a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, our country is founded on these personal rights, and I have rights. Nobody talks about you have rights. Everybody says I have rights.
Yeah, I have rights.
I have rights.
We have rights.
It's I have them, right? And so I think that's where, I mean, for me, here's how I kind of digest some of these, and this might be a good segue towards something that might fit into a box.
Yeah.
But is it, for me, it has to do with what is the oppression, who's it being directed to, and what is the reason for the oppression, or the injustice is probably a better word. And so the idea is, let's say I am the focal point of the injustice. Somebody is doing something unjust to me. And so what are they doing? What are they doing maybe isn't nearly as important as why they are doing it.
Yeah.
And so if, to me, and this is how I've reasoned it out in my mind, I might be wrong. Again, feel free to comment and whatever. But for me, it has to do, or where I start to draw lines, and again, it's not black and white, but if someone is oppressing me because of my belief in Jesus, that is something that I'm much less willing to fight against.
Well, I mean, that's what martyrdom is.
Right. That is injustice to me because of what I believe, because of who I follow, and if that comes my way, I'm just going to take it.
Yeah.
That's my plan.
Yeah.
That's in my
you
mind.
Assume that's how you
in
hope
my
that's
mind,
how
that's
you
my
respond.
plan. Now, if it is injustice done to someone else, to my family, and I'm going to go the easier one, and it has nothing to do with our faith. It has nothing to do with our belief. It's about trying to steal my wife's purse,
right,
or something like that. Then, and I'm assuming a purse that she's holding, and they're trying to rough her up or something. Then I'm going to step in.
Right.
I think as a husband, I think I have an obligation to step in. Which,
Right.
funny is, we're sort of going to talk about this on Sunday.
We are
during class.
Well, we're going to be talking about it in the sermon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've been talking about this exact scenario.
I told him on Sunday how much the sermons have gone along with where we're
just
at
wait.
in 1 Peter.
It's going to tie in pretty...
Because we're talking about husbands and wives in 1 Peter on Sunday.
Well, and we're talking about marriage, so
right.
It's
like I see it as a husband. And as a father, as a parent, it is my obligation to come to that person's defense.
Yeah.
Right. Now, where the lines aren't quite as black and white is, what if someone is oppressing or attacking my family because of what they believe?
Yeah.
Do I just sit there and watch them take it?
Right.
And that's where it gets hard.
That's where it gets hard.
That's where it gets really hard.
And we certainly do not have the answer. We don't claim to have the answer, and I don't really trust people who say they do, because this is one, it's circumstantial. Two, you don't know how you're really going to respond in the moment,
right?
And you don't know if you're going to make things better or worse after the fact. Right. I mean, this is my last big example, but the epitome of evil of what should be taken down is the person of Hitler.
Oh,
I mean, it's like, okay,
we can always go to Hitler.
You can always go to Hitler.
No one names their kids Hitler these
Number
days.
one bad
Adolf
guy.
Even, I don't think.
Yeah, number one bad guy. Obviously, somebody who needs to be taken out. And
what?
And
in a violent way?
Well, and that's the question. And that is what Dietrich Bonhoeffer believed as well. A Christian pacifist.
Yeah.
Believed, and he was actually part of the plotting of taking Hitler out in his assassination, and he failed. He regretted it. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said that it was an unavoidable sin, but he still called it a sin to go after the life of Hitler. He failed it. His own life ended, and
ended by the Nazis. They executed him.
They executed him, and this is where scholars debate, but they say that because of that failed assassination attempt, Hitler was actually able to reign even longer because he became more paranoid from it, and he protected himself even more. It's a sticky situation of, did you make it better? Did you make it worse? And that's where it's just, you don't know.
Right.
You don't know. What we do know is, how am I responding as Jesus would? How am I, and I'm glad you spent time on it, how am I protecting people outside of me? Because if you can learn about anything, if you're going to take anything from this conversation, it's that Jesus was far more concerned about the well-being of others than he was himself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%.
I mean, that is a put a stamp on it. It is done. And that's what he did when he gave everything for us. And then he says, now come and follow in my footsteps.
Mm-hmm.
And
as a matter of fact,
yeah,
just to put a bookend on it with the military thing, it just dawned on me as you're talking. It reminded me. I do remember why that guy, the son of family friend, decided that he didn't. It had to do with the fact that we were going to fight people in a foreign country who were not attacking us. He was like, my oath is to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, right? And to bear true faith and allegiance to the same, right? His thing was like, my primary oath is to defend the Constitution against enemies. These people are not attacking us or our Constitution. Why are we going over there? And that was his big issue. Now, one of the other oaths you also do is to obey the orders of the people appointed over you, which, again, it depends if it's a lawful order. But, again, that's a secondary oath in that thing.
That's sticky.
He decided this is where I'm drawing the line.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of people draw the line. But again, that was I'm not defending our people over here, which is what my oath is for, which is why I'm in the military, to defend us. We're going over and fighting somebody else's fight in a long, far, far away. Now, granted, you're still defending somebody probably, but again, that was where he drew the line, that he felt like he couldn't, in good conscience, cross over that line and go to fight a battle or a war in another country for another reason. Now, again, last little piece of that. Some people, I'm sure, military planners or government leaders or whatever might say, it's like, yeah, but if we don't, they're gonna what could happen? They grow, they get it,
and that's playing with the what ifs.
Yeah,
and I don't know where you draw the line, and we all draw the lines in different places. But as followers of Jesus, I hope our focus is on the kingdom of God first, and following in the footsteps of Jesus, and what that looks like. That's why we need to be. That's why we need to absorb the word.
Right.
That's why we need to be invested in prayer. That's why we need to have difficult conversations that respect each other, even if we may not agree on all points, as we work towards wisdom of what it means to be a follower of Jesus in this world.
Right. Because love, the number one thing in 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient.
Yes.
And so we got to be patient even with those people who think differently than us. Even if you're the more pacifist type person, is being patient with those people who aren't. Or vice versa. If being more patient was like, why won't you stand up for something?
Yeah.
It's like, well, you know what? Gandhi didn't do an act of violence, and he moved a whole country.
Yeah. I am standing up for something. It's just not.
It doesn't look like.
It doesn't look like
the
way you're doing it, which is the point here. Yeah. So, I hope that was helpful. Maybe it just mixed up the water a little bit. It's like a big, cloudy, murky mess now. But that's what these conversations are. They usually end up in murky messes, but we work towards wisdom together.
Yep.
This is more wild talk, I think. I think it's still called more wild talk.
I think.
If they miss three strikes you're out or something like that. There's something with baseball going on right now.
Yep.
Yeah. It's 3 strikes you're out. So maybe we'll have a more oral wild next week. But for now, have a good week.